So now we've talked about how children learn language, let's talk about how they learn numbers. So when do you think children learn to count? And more than that, when do you think children actually understand numbers? Before adding and subtracting, children need number sense. Studies have shown that even infants have a basic number sense. I gave you a quest about one of those studies from the Mickey Mouse experiment. So even infants have a very basic idea of numbers. But let's talk about learning to count. Remember, numbers are symbolic. Toddlers do have some symbolic thought, and most 2-year-olds can count. It's usually full of mistakes, but the idea is there, so they're starting to get there. There are 3 basic principles of counting that children must master before you can consider them proficient. The first is the one-to-one principle. This means that there is one and only one number name for each object that is counted. You don't count the same object more than once, and don't apply the same number name to more than one object. So a child may point to the same object twice, even if they count in order, or they may point to objects one at a time, but say random numbers while they're doing it. Next is the stable order principle. Number names need to occur in the same order every time. 1, 2, 3, etc. Not 3, 7, 2, 5. So young children may say the numbers in order, but not point to a different object each time. Next is the cardinality principle. The last number is the number of objects. So if you're counting something, the last number you say is the total number of objects. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there are 4. Children may count out of order, skipping numbers, and they may even count one-to-one, but say random numbers, and then they'll still announce their last number they said as the answer. So we start to see them have all of these principles, but they still tend to mix them up. It takes them a while to have them all together. All 3 of the principles must exist simultaneously before a child can successfully count. So by the time they reach 5, they can usually count, just maybe not very high, probably to 20. My 3-year-old can count to 12, and then he starts to say random numbers after that. So it really is a process. It takes time to learn it, and each of these principles needs to be practiced and mastered before they can all occur together. As with everything, there's a lot of variation between children, and children who have parents who help them and scaffold them with counting will develop the ability sooner. So we'll talk more about math and math development in our middle childhood section. So play. Play is the most important work of the preschooler. It's so important in the preschool years. It's the most important thing they can do. We're going to go much more into depth into play later in my play lecture. So this is just an overview right now. Right now you need to know that play is important to cognitive, social, and emotional development. It's important for all aspects of a child's development, especially in preschool. And we see a lot of benefits. Language and play. Children actually use more complex language when playing than at other times. We see them use more complex grammar, higher vocabulary. So remember, toddlers will play next to each other but not interact, so they don't really get to practice their language through play. But preschoolers are starting cooperative play, and they're capable of creating elaborate scripts and scenarios. They use language to communicate with each other and guide play. We also see a lot of learning from peers. So talking with other children can actually be more effective at improving language than talking with adults. Adults are very good at figuring out what kids want, even if the words or meanings are not clear, but other kids are not nearly as good at that. So this forces children to improve their communication skills in order to get their peers to understand them. And play is the best way to help children learn from each other. This fits very nicely with Vygotsky's theory of the more knowledgeable other. Children with poorer language skills can learn very quickly from a peer who is better. So, symbolic pretend play, this is like dress-up play. In this play, preschoolers get to try on different roles. They may even include different genders. So you may see a boy pretending to be a mommy or a girl pretending to be a daddy, and it's all just them trying out different roles. pretend play with toys, like with dolls or even blocks or cars. They explore scenarios, they role play, they tell stories, and what they experience in their life comes out in their play, and it provides amazing insight into their thought processes and emotions. This is again why play therapy is so powerful. Another type of play are manipulative activities. So building with blocks might teach them about science, physics, constructions, or like sand tables or water tables. These are very sensory forms of play. They can improve creativity. Both symbolic and manipulative play are important to cognitive, emotional, and social development. Again, we'll talk much more about play later. Moral development. We'll explore this much more in middle childhood and adolescence, but let's talk briefly about the morality of preschoolers. So, review. Morality in infants. So remember, even infants show a basic idea of right and wrong and of justice when shown toys that are being helpful and toys that are not being helpful. They prefer the helpful toys. So they do show some basic morality. But what about toddlers? Well, they have very basic notions of empathy and right or wrong. Remember, toddlers will attempt to comfort someone who is sad, but in an egocentric way. So they're starting to get there. But according to Piaget, he believed that preschoolers have no real sense of morality. He said that they're egocentric little creatures who behave in egocentric manners. They know what gets them in trouble, but do they know that it is wrong? Piaget says no. Another theorist we'll talk about a lot is Lawrence Kohlberg. He has perhaps the most famous theory of moral development. His stages of moral development don't focus on age groups, it's just stages of moral reasoning. So people advance through his stages at different rates, and some don't even go all the way through. We'll discuss his theory in more depth later, but for him, preschoolers would most likely be in his first stage, called pre-conventional morality. So in this stage, morality is based on punishment and reward. Therefore, morality is still very egocentric. So morality begins with strict obedience to authority, so they do things in order to avoid punishment, and then it evolves to an exchange. They want nice behaviors for rewards. So a child follows rules because adults have absolute power, then because of self-interest. They don't yet follow rules because they are the right thing to do. That comes later. So that's all I have for early childhood cognitive development. If you have any questions, please post them on the Blackboard forum.